Hey everyone, welcome to the Let's Create series, a series where we'll create mechanics from popular games using blueprints. Today we'll be polishing Pharahs Jetpack and boost abilities. We'll also be creating a small minigame out of them. If you're new to this series, make sure to watch the foundation video, and if you haven't yet, make sure to watch the other Pharah video before this one. So what I want to do is first show you some improvements that I made over the Pharah controller. And I made these because a few people yesterday were mentioning that Event Tick can weigh the game down quite a lot in terms of performance, and that we can use the timeline to negate this negative performance, which is really smart. So I looked into it and I figured out a way we can include it. So the first thing I did was I included a jump. So instead of running every frame now, we activate all of these nodes first by having to press space. Once you have pressed space, we go into the timeline. Now the timeline is the thing that can help us loop. You'll see what I've done with branch here, I'll go through in a second, but the timeline is going to allow us to continue to hover, to continue to increase hover time. It's also going to allow us to decrease hover time. And it is actually going to end rather than continuously tick, which is what the event tick was doing. So what we do is we plug the update into sequence. This is the same thing we're doing with event tick. It will run all of these blueprints nodes. The difference is we have a finish node. Now, what I'm doing here is when hover time is greater than 0, when that's true, we loop back into the timeline. The reason why we loop back is because I want to take away, decrement hover time. It will continue to loop and decrement hover time until it is no longer greater than 0. The moment it's no longer greater than 0, this timeline will stop functioning and it will no longer take any processing power, unlike the event tick, which was going to continuously run for the entire game. The reason why this is a negative thing is because if you have a lot of event ticks and a lot of components running at once, you can drag down the game's performance quite a lot. So it's a lot better to use something like a timeline. And this is from my understanding so far. So all you have to do is copy my setup here, and these are the only things I've changed. Now, to get back into the main part of this lesson, we're going to focus on polishing up the game. Before we begin, in our Pharah controller, we need to create a variable called score. And we want to make sure our score is an integer because we just need it to be a whole number. Once you have done that, we are going to create the rings that you can fly through. I call them rings because that's what I call them. That's like in other games. But we're going to create these rings you can fly through. The way we're going to create that is by adding in spheres into the scene. And I'm just going to change the scale to something like 0.8 overall. And then I'm going to hold Alt and drag this up. Shift click, so we have both of them. Hold Alt, drag it over here, rotate them, and then just put them into place here. So this is the system that the player will be able to fly through. And I'm just going to create a bit more distance. So something like that. We are then going to do something new where we click the first one, shift click to the bottom one, and then what we're going to do is go to Blueprints, convert selected components to Blueprint class, click on Blueprints and call this the BP underscore ring collectible. We'll then see this setup here, and what we can do is we can click on these, and we're going to add the emission that we have used a few lessons ago. So if you click there and type in emission, emissive, you'll get m underscore emissive. Oh, there should be, one moment, it might be an instance. Instance underscore collectible jump pad, that's the one. So we get our instance underscore jump pad, and now that's all lit up. We can then create a box collision, and then make sure it's not childed to anything, so just drag that out. And then we can change the extent, so we can put this in the center, and make this something like 180 by 180. And then we can compile, save that, and go into our event graph. Now what I want to do is I want to make these rotate on the spot. And in order to do that, it's quite simple. We're going to use our timeline once again, but this time we're going to look at a new component within it. We have autoplay and also loop. Loop will make this run until it is interrupted. So for example, if the actor dies, and autoplay means it will start playing from the beginning. We can then go to our update and we can use something called add actor local rotation. And because we have this, if we were to type a value in here, it will rotate on that axis. If we want to be a bit better than that, we can create a variable, rotation, direction, make this a rotator, drag this over here, get, and plug this into there. Make sure you hit compile, and now we can change the values here. The reason why this is good is because if you make this editable, you can change this inside of the Unreal Editor. So if I minimize this now, you will see on default, I have all these rotation values. So if I was to make the X a 2, just make sure that was put in, hit play, you'll see it's now rotating. And it's just a looping timeline. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to make it so that when we go through it, we collide with it, it makes a sound, and we get score. So we can just comment this bit here, and this can be our rotation. And then down here we can create a few new things. So we can get our box collision, we can add a component hit, we can then cast to the Pharah controller, because that's the character that we want to check if it collides with this box. The object is the other actor, so we're going to check if the other actor is the Pharah controller. If it is the Pharah controller, well, let's get the score that we recently created, and let's actually increment it. So increment int, and then we can just drag this into here, and now this will add to the score. The next thing we can do for visual feedback is to play sound 2D, and make sure you have some sound effects just from BFXR. I've created 2 already, and I've put them into my project. And what we're going to do is I've named mine the pickup sound 2, and then we're going to just destroy the actor. So let's try this out again. So hit play. So this one didn't work. Let's see why. So we cast to our Pharah controller, play the sound and destroy. The only thing I can think of is if we look at our box, we have our overlap all dynamic. We have the collision there. So on component hit box, let's just try this one more time. So add event, collision, add component. Sorry, begin overlap, not hit. That's my mistake. The reason why it's not hit, we are not blocking, so we are using an overlap. If you check over here, an overlap all dynamic. And overlap only works, of course, when you do an overlap collision. So let's try that again. And there we go. We've gone through it, we got a score, and the sound went off. So we can comment this, call this the player collision. And what we're going to do next is bring in the UI elements. So in order to do this, we're just going to close this. We're going to create a widget. So if you right click, go to user interface and widget blueprint, we can call this our widget underscore score UI. We can then double click this and we will be introduced to our widget interface. So this is the designer, and it has a bunch of really nice stuff over here. We're going to mess around first with the text to get used to this. So drag out a text component from the palette, and what we're going to do is call this our score text. The reason why it's a score text is because it's simply just going to sit there and be called score. We will not interact with this in any way. We are then going to change the font size to 40, and then we're going to just drag this out. And we can just place that in the corner. We're going to then just copy and paste, so Control-C, Control-V. And this one can just be called score. And then we can just type in 0. The only other thing I want to do is take these elements, so Control-C, Control-V, copy, paste. Sometimes the Control-C doesn't work for me for some reason. And then copy and paste. We can then take this and bring it over here. And then we can call this the fuel text. So you see where I'm going with this. We're doing the exact same thing. And this can be fuel, and that would be 0. And instead of a score, we'll just call this the fuel. And we can make this look a bit nicer later. We'll just grab these two elements. So drag this over here and drag that over there. We'll do alignment after. Okay, now to make this functional, we need to access the graph. In order to do this, we're going to go to our text. So we click on the score, click on bind, and create a binding. So in the binding, what we can do is we can add a functionality. And this is going to be really cool. So in order to add functionality to this, we want to get the score, because this is about the score. So we need to cast to the Pharah controller. We're then going to get the object, which is get player pawn, because the Pharah controller is currently the active player pawn. We can then get the score, and you notice it needs a return node, and it needs a text. So what we're going to do is we're going to convert this to a text. You can just drag in here, but I want to show you how to access this node yourself. Just type in here to text, and it will give you a float or integer. We're going to click int because this score is an integer, and then we'll plug it into the return value. We can then hit compile and save. Now, if you press play right now, you notice your UI isn't popping up. We need to actually allow it to load into the scene. We need to add it to the viewport. In order to do this, you need to go to blueprints, open level blueprint, and then in here, we can add a level blueprint, which we'll want to display the UI. So we're going to get event, begin play, because we want this to happen when the game starts, when the map starts. We're creating a widget, so create widget. And the class is the widget that we want to display to the player. In this case, it's the widget underscore score UI. And then this isn't enough because we've created it. We need to add it to the viewport. And this is called add to viewport. The thing we want to add is the target. In this case, it's the return value of this widget. So now we can hit compile and minimize this, hit play, and you'll notice the UI has appeared. And because we created that binding, if I jump through here, we get a score of 1. We can now close the level blueprint, and we're in the graph right now, so let's go back to the designer, and now we can do the exact same thing for the fuel. So click on bind, create binding, and really quickly over here, we should name these. So click on the fuel, we'll call this player fuel, and click on the score, click again, and we'll call this player score. Inside of player fuel, we're going to do the exact same thing, but this time we're going to get what's called hover time. So we could have called this hover amount. I just called it fuel because I don't know, I just did. So drag this out, cast to cast to Pharah controller. We're going to get player pawn once again. And then what we're going to do after this is we're going to get our target, which is hover time. And then we're going to convert this to text float, because our data type this time, if you hover here, is a float. And we'll plug that into there, compile, save, and now we can go back to designer. Since we're happy with this, you might want to just align these a bit nicer. It's completely up to you. I'll let you guys handle that after this. So just compile and save that for now. Cool. That looks weird. I'll just leave it like that for now. So compile, save. I'm going to close this off, hit play, F11, and you can see our fuel being used. And you can also see the score going up now. So what we can do now is we can actually go and create our mini obstacle course, because we have all the functionality required for this mini game using Pharahs Jetpack abilities. So I'm going to create a little obstacle course. I'm going to speed this bit up, and I'll see you guys right after I do this section. Thank you for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this content, consider supporting me on Patreon. The Patreon community are what keep this series alive. I hope you got something useful out of this, and remember, pursue what is important to you, because impossible is just a mindset. I'll see you in the next video.